Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, The Intimacy Lab. Let me ask you something simple, but quietly complicated. Have you ever stared at your phone, knowing you could reply, but something in you just didn't want to? Maybe you were tired, maybe you needed space, maybe you didn't know what to say, and so you didn't. You just didn't text back. Now I want you to imagine the silence you left behind. Because silence, you see, doesn't just sit there quietly. It speaks, it triggers, it imagines. For her, it becomes a canvas, not of what you feel, but of everything she's ever feared. The woman you didn't text back, she's not just wondering where you are, she's wondering if she still matters. If she imagined the whole connection, if she's being punished for wanting more. She's not just hearing silence, she's hearing echoes of every man who made her feel replaceable. And here's the truth most men don't realize. It's not the lack of a message that hurts her, it's the message she thinks your silence is sending. So in today's video, we're going to gently untangle what happens in her mind when you disappear into that quiet. And more importantly, what it reveals about her and about you. Sometimes we mistake digital silence for nothing. But silence in a relationship, especially when there's emotional curiosity, vulnerability, or desire involved, is never neutral. It's never nothing. When you don't text her back, even if unintentionally, you've handed her a mirror, but not one that reflects you. It reflects her own stories, her own anxieties, her private fears that say, maybe I cared too much, or worse, maybe I was foolish to think he cared at all. And here's the nuance, she's not reacting to just you. She's reacting to every time she has ever felt the bottom fall out of emotional safety. Every ex who ghosted, every friend who disappeared, every unanswered question she swallowed so she wouldn't seem too needy. You might be thinking, but I was just busy, or I didn't know what to say, or even I'll reply later, and all of that could be true. But in the emotional space between the seen message and your silence, something else begins to bloom inside her. Something uncomfortable, something raw, and it's not just the waiting, it's what the waiting says. It whispers, I'm not worth prioritizing. It stings, maybe I imagined his interest. It repeats an old wound, this is what it's like to want someone more than they want me. Now, of course, not all women react this way. But many do, especially women who lead with their heart, who are emotionally attuned, who notice subtleties. These are not women who are weak, they're women who are open, and openness comes with a cost, because openness means she feels everything more. For a woman who's emotionally invested, your silence doesn't feel like space. It feels like rejection with no explanation. Like a door that was open an hour ago, but now won't budge. But here's the real twist. If she didn't care, she wouldn't notice your absence. She wouldn't check the timestamp on your last login. She wouldn't scroll back to your last words to see if she missed something, misread something, said something wrong. She notices your silence because she notices you, and it becomes this painful loop. She tells herself to stay calm, to not overthink, to not double text, but every minute you're silent, her imagination gets louder. Because in the absence of communication, the mind fills in the gaps. And we rarely fill those gaps with grace. Now pause with me for a moment. This isn't to shame you. This isn't a sermon on replying faster or being perfect. This is about awareness, emotional fluency, the ability to understand that when you pull away, even slightly, even momentarily, she might not see it as rest. She might see it as risk. That's the cost of modern connection. We're all just one unread message away from feeling unwanted. One left read moment away from emotional disarray. Because in today's world, your silence is louder than your words. And for her, it can feel like the beginning of goodbye, even when you didn't mean it to be. What does she think when you don't text back? She thinks, maybe I'm chasing. She thinks, did I misread the intimacy? She thinks, how can someone go from warm to cold so fast? And sometimes she tries to protect herself by pulling away too. She tries to reclaim dignity by not reaching out again. She begins to mirror the silence you left, not because she wants to, but because she's learning to survive it. You see, the emotional field between two people is like a dance, and when one person suddenly stops moving, the other stumbles. Not because they're weak, but because they were following your rhythm. So when you pause communication, you change the music. And often you don't even realize it, but she does. She hears the shift in tone. She feels the distance in your absence. And she starts to make decisions based on what you haven't said. And that's where misunderstandings grow. Not in what was spoken, but in what was missing. What's dangerous here is that men and women often experience this silence differently. For many men, not texting back is logical. I'll get to it later. It's compartmentalized, detached. But for women, especially emotionally expressive ones, communication is tethered to closeness. It's not a task. It's a signal. A man might think, I didn't text her back, but it doesn't mean I don't care. She thinks if he cared, he would have said something. That gap. That's where relationships unravel, and it's not just about texting. It's about emotional presence. Attention, the willingness to stay in connection even when things feel uncertain, because when you don't respond, she's not just hearing silence. She's hearing every unresolved story from her past, and sometimes she's wondering if she's starting a new one with you. You may not realize this, but many women don't need you to respond right away. They don't need constant conversation. They don't even need every answer tied up in a bow. But what they do need is emotional continuity, a feeling of being carried even in your silence. What unsettles her is not the gap in hours, it's the break in emotional rhythm. It's that yesterday you called her beautiful and shared the details of your day, and today she's standing in that same emotional space with no echo of you. It's like she's waiting in a room that's suddenly gone quiet. The lights are still on, but you're gone. That absence feels personal, even if it's not, even if it's just life, even if it's stress, even if it's nothing. And this is where we often forget. Emotional responses are not always logical. They are felt. So she begins to turn inward. She rereads old messages, looking for the moment something changed. She replays the tone of your last voice note. She wonders if maybe she came on too strong, if maybe she asked for too much, if maybe her softness was seen as clingy. And here's what hurts her most, not knowing what version of you she's going to get. When you text, when you call, when you're present, she opens. She relaxes. She lets herself feel safe in the connection. But when you disappear, that safety collapses. And she's left alone, holding both versions of you, the warm man who saw her and the distant one who now feels like a stranger. That duality, that unpredictability, that inconsistency, it messes with her nervous system, because what she craves isn't just your affection, it's your reliability. A man who disappears without clarity leaves her emotionally disoriented, and when that disorientation becomes a pattern, she doesn't just stop trusting you, she starts doubting herself. Her self-worth gets entangled with your silence, and maybe you don't mean to do this. Maybe you think space is healthy, even necessary. And it is, but space without communication, without respect, without context, becomes emotional neglect. And she begins to shrink. She sends shorter messages. She holds back her joy, her excitement, her curiosity. She gives you less not because she has less to give, but because she's now rationing her vulnerability. This is the woman who once laughed freely with you, who asked deep questions, who opened her past like pages of a journal she trusted you to read. And now she checks every word she types. She asks herself, will this push him away? She shouldn't have to ask that. Love shouldn't be a place where silence feels like punishment, and for many men the withdrawal isn't cruel. It's not calculated, it's not malicious, it's just a pattern, something you learned from a father who was emotionally absent. Something modeled to you by men who saw feelings as inconvenience, something you never questioned because no one ever told you that silence could feel like rejection. But now you know, and I want to speak to that part of you that actually cares, the part that maybe doesn't have the language yet, but wants to be better, the part that has felt love, but doesn't always know how to stay present in it. Because here's the truth, your silence doesn't just affect her. It affects the relationship you're building. You might think that you're protecting yourself by pulling away, by not saying the wrong thing, by taking time. But what you're doing is creating an emotional vacuum, and when there's no clarity, the mind creates its own storm. Sometimes she'll fill that silence with self-blame, other times with indifference, and if you wait too long, she might fill it with someone else. Not because she wanted to replace you, but because she needed to replace the ache you left, and that is where many good connections go to die. Not in a fight, not in betrayal, but in silence, because emotional safety isn't built on intensity, it's built on consistency. So let's talk about what presence really means. It means you don't disappear when things get boring. You don't run when the conversation isn't sexy. You don't ghost because your life got hard. You show up not perfectly, not poetically, but honestly. A short message that says, "Hey, I'm overwhelmed right now, but I'm still here," means more than disappearing for 3 days and then returning with small talk. She's not asking for a novel. She's asking for a signal, because when you leave her in silence, you're leaving her in the dark. And even the strongest women can't keep blooming in darkness. So if you truly care about her, don't just be the man who comes alive when it's convenient. Be the man who holds the thread, even when things feel quiet or ordinary or difficult. That's what she's thinking deep down. That's what she's afraid to say, that she's still holding on while wondering if you've already let go. There's something very fragile about the early phases of connection, and when I say fragile, I don't mean weak. I mean delicate, sacred, like something in bloom that needs care, not control, not intensity, just attention. You see, most women aren't looking for grand gestures when they're getting to know you. They're looking for rhythm, for evidence that the emotional space between the two of you isn't a gamble, that if she opens more, she won't fall into silence. Because silence has a memory. It reminds her of moments when she gave too much, and someone disappeared. It reminds her of times she made herself emotionally available, only to be met with vanishing acts disguised as freedom. And the hardest part for many women isn't your absence. It's the way she has to explain your absence to herself. She builds stories because in the absence of clarity, the mind crafts fiction, and fiction, when written in fear, is rarely kind. He's probably talking to someone else. He must have realized I'm too much. He was never really interested. I just wanted to believe he was. And suddenly, what could have been a healthy pause becomes a wound, a tiny tear in the thread of trust. That's how emotional distance creeps in, not as a hurricane, but as a slow disconnection. You might return with a casual "hey," and expect things to pick up where they left off. But what you don't see is the inner storm she endured while waiting. You don't see the restraint it took for her not to chase. The self-doubt she had to soothe on her own. And here's the cruel twist. The longer you stay silent, the more she feels she can't speak. Because if she asks where you went, she fears being labeled needy. If she expresses confusion, she fears being told she's overreacting. If she seeks clarity, she fears losing you altogether. So what does she do? She internalizes, she adapts. She pretends she doesn't care as much. She mimics your detachment not because it's who she is, but because it seems safer than reaching out into the void. This is how emotional performativity begins, where two people stop being real with each other, where both are feeling things, but no one is saying anything. And suddenly what could have been honest becomes hollow. But I want to tell you something, especially if you're a man who wants to love well, but hasn't always known how. Presence doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean texting all day or always having the right words. It means making space, naming the space, giving her something solid to hold while you're away. It could be as simple as, I need some time to process, I'll check in soon. I've got a lot on my plate today, but I'm still thinking about you. I care about you. I'm not ghosting, just regrouping. You'd be amazed how far a little emotional anchoring can go. Because at the core of all of this is one truth. When a woman starts to emotionally invest in you, she's not just looking for your desire. She's looking for your dependability. Desire is exciting, but dependability, that's rare. That's what calms her nervous system. That's what earns her trust, and when you don't text back, especially with no context, what she thinks is not just about you. It's about whether she can trust her own instincts, whether she's wasting her energy, whether she's once again misjudging connection. That's the wound, if we're being honest. Not that you didn't reply, but that she might have been wrong to believe you ever would. And if that pattern repeats, you don't just lose her attention, you lose her openness, you lose her softness. And eventually you lose her altogether, not in anger, not in a dramatic exit, but quietly, emotionally. Slowly, she'll stop asking, she'll stop wondering, she'll stop reaching, and one day she just won't be there anymore. So if you feel something for her, don't let your silence be louder than your care. Don't let distance become default. Don't hide behind I'm not good with emotions while she's out there navigating the storm your silence created. Because love isn't about being perfect, it's about being present, and sometimes the most powerful message you can send is simply that she matters enough to not be left in the dark. If there's anything I've learned from sitting across couples in therapy rooms, across stories of heartbreak, longing, confusion, it's that the silent moments matter more than we think. Not because silence is inherently bad, but because silence that lacks care becomes distance, and distance, when left unnamed, becomes detachment. When a woman doesn't hear from you, she doesn't just miss your words, she misses the rhythm, the assurance. The invisible thread that reminds her this isn't just a game of attention. It's a real human connection. We live in a world that teaches men to retreat when feelings rise, to pause when intensity enters, to hold back not because they're cruel, but because many of them were never taught how to stay. But if you want to love well, really love, not just impress, you must learn how to remain emotionally available even when you're uncertain, even when you're tired, even when you need space, because needing space doesn't mean abandoning presence. You can need time and still offer clarity. You can be busy and still send warmth. You can be overwhelmed and still respect the other person's emotional reality. This is emotional responsibility. This is what separates a man who's afraid of connection from one who is worthy of it. And if you've already gone silent, if you're watching this and realizing, maybe I left her wondering, then let this be the moment you return not just with a message, but with meaning. Because here's what she's been thinking beneath the confusion, beneath the restraint, beneath the brave face. I just wanted to know if I mattered. I just wanted him to say it wasn't all in my head. I just needed to feel chosen, not just when it was easy, but when it was inconvenient. And if she's still there, still checking her phone, still hoping, you haven't lost her yet, but be mindful. Trust isn't a switch, it's a thread, and the more you stretch it, the more tension you create. Break it too many times, and it won't tie back together so easily. So let this be a reminder, communication isn't just about saying things. It's about making someone feel seen even when you're not physically there. She doesn't need poems, she doesn't need paragraphs, she just needs presence, the small steady acts that whisper, I care enough to not leave you guessing, because being wanted feels nice. But being considered, that's love, that's what stays, that's what heals. And if you've ever wondered why she suddenly stopped reaching out, why she seemed colder, why she no longer replies with the same warmth, it wasn't random. It was residue from the unanswered texts, from the unspoken silences, from the moments she had to carry the emotional weight alone. So if you're still in it, if you still feel her in your heart, then don't let your silence be the loudest thing she remembers about you. Say something, not because you have to, but because you want to, because she's not asking for constant attention, she's asking for emotional intention. And maybe, just maybe, the man who learns how to communicate even when it's hard, even when he's unsure, even when it feels vulnerable, becomes the man she's been waiting for all along. So say the thing, send the message, break the silence, let her know she was never crazy for caring. She was human, and so are you. Welcome to the Intimacy Lab.